Welcome to the BXG Podcast, the podcast where pop culture and nerd culture meet.
You think it's just going to be barbecue sauce?
Because if you actually read those books, it's just gobbledygook.
I really think clothes should be mandatory.
Speaking of Star Wars,
Captain America.
trailer reaction video.
Mandalorian. Let's do a season review. Season 3 of The Mandalorian. I'm not going to change background. I'm over it.
I love it. We're the not.
Yeah, we are. That's what this is now. So what did you think of it? Just
I don't know. I just.
it happened.
I get the rest. It didn't happen.
Oh, that was a bad snarfle. I apologize for the listeners.
I said like a snarfle too. So it happened. I'm just gonna be very honest. I really didn't like. I didn't like it. I just didn't. I can't even like. I was trying like the last episode. I was trying to like piece together things. I thought it was bad. I was trying to think. I did this thing too, where I was like, "Well, I've seen so much really good television, like insanely good." And like, Ted Lasso. I know that people don't like Ted Lasso as much now. It's corny now, but I also came to the conclusion that I'm also just corny now, so that's okay. But watch Succession, watch The Last of Us, watch some other things too out of it. And I was just like, maybe it's just that. But then I was like, no, I think this show just got it got too big to fail.
Too big for it to.
I think is to say. Yeah, and that was a problem because that episode where it had Jack Black and Lizzo, I absolutely hated that episode beyond belief. And it has nothing against us. I'm fine with both of them. But I don't want that or need that in this show because that's not what this show is about. Like having Luke Skywalker, having Mark Hamill was fine because like fucking Mark Hamill like Luke Skywalker. But I think it was one of those shows.
By the way, I guess I don't know.
Yeah.
She is like,
Correct.
She's a larger.
If you don't know, it's fine. But it was just like one of those things where like, you sent me that literally like while they're in it and while I was watching it. And I'm like, this show doesn't need this, and I don't want this. Like, this isn't a joke. This is a thing. And I know that, like, Star Wars has, like, guest appearances, but Daniel Craig's, like,
With an unnamed, he's a stormtrooper. He doesn't.
Yeah, he's a stormtrooper or whatever. Yeah, and it's like, so it's those kind of things where, like, yeah, celebrities love these movies or whatever because they're awesome. At least they're one of it, and they want to be a part of it. But like to have your face shown, to have everything about it, so that threw me, and that made me actually like. Was me say like that was the week where I took off from my trip to Colombia, but
Was it?
Like it made me mad. Made me actually mad. I maybe could be, but either way, it made me mad. I was like actually like upset about that episode to a degree where I was like, this isn't what this show is. And like we've gone on. I was in the season finale, tried to reel it back into what it kind of was, but it wasn't enough to bring me back. I think we got one more season of this show, honestly, because it's confirmed they're having another season, I believe. But I think that has to be it because I think they're running out of ideas, and I also think that it's just, I don't know what they can do at this point. Like, what are they going to do now? Like, he's going to talk, or Grogu's going to Grogu is going to talk? I don't know. It seems very weak at this point when the show was so good. I mean, that second season was very, very good, and we both really enjoyed it. It had some very, very high moments, but it just doesn't seem now that... I'd be very interested to see if they can do anything to pull it off in the way that they could with that first season too.
Well, I think that the season finale was what the show needed in terms of being almost like an ending point and a soft reset. The first episode, if we go back to the first episode of this season, we did have a review for that. There was, well, you have to go to YouTube to find the review for that, for reasons out of our control, that are quite frankly fucking bullshit. But we'll just leave that there for now. That episode gave me great vibes because it felt like it went back into that kind of spaghetti western inspired. Specifically, there's the standoff on the street and he's like leaning on the tree. And I was like, okay,
That's great.
we're back. We're back where we need to be after season 2 had some, it was good, but there were some turns and okay. And then the whole Book of Boba Fett thing. But I feel like the end of this season where it's okay, him and Grogu go to the Rangers of the New Republic and they're like, well, we're about it, or we're looking for work. That's where this show needs to exist.
Yeah.
And I think that the show, especially in this season, got too concerned, and this is a Marvel problem. It got too concerned with how do we set up what's next? How do we tie this into the larger universe as a whole? Whereas the first season, there was nothing guaranteed beyond that.
Right.
And so it had to stand alone on its own 2 feet without necessarily having the guarantee of more to come. I mean, there was probably a guarantee, but nobody knew for sure. And the other thing was with the first season was it came in during COVID. And so it was this like breath of fresh air. There wasn't anything else that was new, and it was just right at the right time. And I think that this season was and they had the conversation during Star Wars Celebration of, well, does the Mandalorian refer specifically to Din Djarin, or is it just, could it be any Mandalorian? And it's like, okay, we're getting a little bit too, what's the word I'm looking for here?
I would say lost in the sauce.
Well, yeah, but I think that it's like, it's a little too vague. Not the word I'm looking for, but it'll have to do. It's a little too vague. It's a little bit too out there for me. And I think at the end of the day, with this show, people want this show to be about the adventures of Din Djarin and Grogu. And I think that once you move beyond that, you're running the risk of losing people. And I think that that's kind of what happened with this season. And I think that, like, quite honestly, one of the longest running television shows in the history of television is Gunsmoke. It's a Western about this town, and you've got the sheriff, Matt Dillon, and his deputy, Festus, and like people in the town, and it just worked for so many seasons. And the reason because it was just like the day-to-day adventures of this town. And I think that sometimes in this sort of era that we're in, that was really pioneered by Marvel, where it's like, okay, well, not necessarily pioneered, but popularized by Marvel, where the idea is this connects to this and this sets up this, and this character is eventually going to interact with this character, and we're going to have these characters over here, and they're going to form this alliance with these characters that you never even thought was possible. And now everything is projecting towards that. We've got the DCU. We just talked about the potential of an NCU. There's the obviously the Marvel stuff, and all the Star Wars stuff has interconnectivity, and there's the monster verse or whatever, and then there's the Godzilla verse or whatever. Everything has to be its own like universe. But I honestly believe that these two characters are so popular that if they just said week to week, it's just going to be, they're going out on a bounty hunt.
Yeah,
And that's
it could easily be that.
I think that people would be fine with that. I think that the general fans would be like, oh man, what are these guys going to get into this week? Kick my legs up for 45 minutes and just see some cool space shit. You know, it doesn't have to be all of this. And I think that we've talked about it a lot. Less is more in a lot of these cases. And I think that sometimes it is the push for mind share. It is the push for, you know, big C content and understanding that people. We said this about Marvel when Marvel at the beginning of Phase 4 with like the Eternals was a miss and some of the shows weren't hitting, and it's like Marvel, being a Marvel fan, being a fan of the MCU, being someone who follows this is like a lifestyle choice because it takes up so much of your time. And I think that Star Wars is kind of always been that way, but because you have like the novels and the comic books and the cartoons and the movies, but there's always been a level of accessibility with the core movies where you didn't need everything to know it and appreciate it. And that all kind of stopped when Disney took over. And all the old stories were like, all the old novels that were basically just fan fiction, but they were decanonized, and those, you know, that's the extended legends or whatever. And now all of the novels have to connect. And I read the Aftermath trilogy, which is a trilogy that of books that I really enjoyed, and it tied into this era of when After the Empire Falls. But some of the characters are now starting to show up in some of these shows. Cobb Vanth was in that trilogy of books. I mentioned Brendel Hux, who popped up in one of the episodes of the season. And so it becomes to the point where it's just too much. And I think that they will eventually get to a point, because Marvel got to that point where they're like, okay, there's too much. We're going to target 2 movies and 2 shows a year now, instead of there's going to be 4 TV shows and a cartoon series and 3 movies. And, you know, like everything is just like crammed down your throat. They realize that maybe the fans don't want that. And I think that we're going to reach a point with Star Wars where it's the same thing, because at this point, we've had 3 seasons of Mandalorian, 1 season of Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Andor. That's it for the live action stuff.
Yeah.
Unless I'm missing something. Andor, amazing.
Yes.
Mandalorian season 1, amazing. Mandalorian season 2, in my opinion, 1 step below amazing. Mandalorian season 3, C.
Yeah.
Obi-Wan, I liked it, but C.
Yeah, right.
Book of Boba Fett, D. And so you're getting into this point where it's like, okay, 50% of the stuff's really good and 50% of it is not so great. So why don't we slow down and focus on making quality products and quality projects instead of just becoming inundated with as much as we can get out there?
No, I 100% agree. It's just that thing where it's like, you know, I think I said when I said it was just like the idea of it got too big for its britches. And I think it was one of those shows where I don't think they thought it was going to be as popular as it was. And like, I mean, because of Star Wars, but there was also, it became so big and became such a thing.
Well, I think timing.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, timing was just so perfect for it. And so I had to keep up with that. Yeah. And, you know, Boba Fett's a really, like, popular character, but this isn't Boba Fett. This is the Mandalorian. Right. And so it's the idea, like, someone in that zeitgeist, but not the same thing. And then that happened. And I think, honestly, what I think really hurt this was Boba Fett. That show just really did nothing. I mean, it just didn't, you know, it just does nothing on the meter. Yeah. And so you're expecting, well, that show wasn't great, so now the next season Mandalorian is going to be fucking amazing, and then it wasn't, and that's becomes a problem.
I think too.
I think that becomes a problem.
I agree. I agree with you to an extent. I also think, well, not even to an extent, I agree with you. But I also think, just to add to that, that to us, I know a lot of people didn't like it or they thought it was boring or whatever, which is wild to me. If that's how you feel, go watch, Friends. But Andor was so good.
Andor was amazing.
And I think that it
Yeah.
raised the expectations a little bit. And I don't think that this season of The Mandalorian answered the bell.
And this is what, sorry, but Andor is very highbrow, high
Yeah.
concept.
Yes.
We haven't talked this much about this, but like my favorite late night show ever is Dave Letterman. But my second favorite is Conan O'Brien, and it's because Conan O'Brien is so high concept, and so Conan is very high concept, very funny to a certain group of people. You remember Conan wrote for The Simpsons and things like that. Loved Conan. Stayed up every night. I didn't care. Go to bed at 1:30 in the morning, wake up at 5:30 and next day to go to school. But then he takes over The Tonight Show and it doesn't work. Because he's too high concept for people that like The Tonight Show and like that, whatever it is. It's just, I think we can all agree that The Tonight Show with Jay Leno and even The Tonight Show now is not funny for like the high concept thinker. And so Andor is very high concept. It's very, very good, very high concept. But if you're just kind of that middle, and I mean nothing about intelligence, it's just the way you want to watch television.
Yeah. Sure.
There's the idea of watching television. There's a reason why, like, The Big Bang Theory had 29 million people watch it, because it was a show you could just watch. There's no thinking about it, and then there's a reason why, like, shows that are, like, essentially better just don't have as many viewers. I mean, Seinfeld, obviously, we think that Seinfeld's very good, but Seinfeld was never really rated, ratings-wise, the best show. There are other shows that just had higher ratings here and there. I think maybe one season of Seinfeld was the highest rated season of all time, but not all time, but of that season. But there were other shows that just kind of hit because Seinfeld, very high concept. And so I think the first season of Mandalorian was very high concept and very different. And then, like you said, season 2 had its ups and downs, high concept, low. But I think this third season was almost just, they didn't know what to do anymore. And it makes me think of that idea of, like, we don't know because, like, we weren't expecting to have, maybe not the viewership, but we weren't expecting to have this kind of thing happen, I think was the idea.
Well, I don't think it's so much that they didn't know what to do. I think that it was, we have to, rather than it being just like, okay, it's the adventure of the week, it became, now we are building out this timeline of, we've established in the sequels, we've established the Resistance and we've established the First Order. And we know that at the end of Return of the Jedi, the Empire is gone, but what does that time period in the middle look like? And I think that they started with this concept of, okay, we're going to make this show about this bounty hunter. And given the possibilities, we can tether it down the line, sort of deal. And now they've reached the point where we're down the line and they're building out this timeline from going all the way back to the Phantom Menace to the end of the sequels, which they're also playing with the in-between time between Rogue One, or not Rogue One, Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope with Obi-Wan Kenobi and Andor, and the Solo movie and Rogue One. But they're playing with these different timelines, and it's like, okay, we have to fill out this entire timeline. And it's where things kind of get like small universe syndrome for me a little bit, because everything revolves around the Skywalkers, and everything revolves around, you know, this small group of people. And that's why some of the things that they announced, I'm particularly excited for, because one of the movies takes place thousands of years before all this. And it's like, okay, well, this is a timeline we haven't explored, and we're going to kind of see the origins of the Force and all these different things. And it's like, okay, that's something different. And part of the reason why I really liked The Mandalorian Season 1 was because it had no tethers to anything. It stood on its own. Same as Andor, right? I think that's what kind of makes those special. Is,
Right.
I mean, Andor has a little bit more tethers with like Mon Mothma and that sort of thing, but there are no Skywalkers. In the first season, there are no Jedi. There's whispers, there's mentions of it, but that's it. And that's what I liked about it, was because it was something that felt new and different. And now it just feels like cookie cutter being shoved into, okay, we have to make the timeline. We have to make it all make sense. And so that's just kind of like, I don't think that it was like, okay, we don't know what to do with these characters. I think it was, well, now we've kind of painted ourselves into this corner where we have to connect this to Ahsoka. We have to connect this to, you know, these other shows. How are we going to do that? We have to shoehorn the next big bad guy of the next show into this by talking about him in his scene, that sort of thing. And so it's just
Right.
like, that's what I just think that the whole shared universe thing, it can be great, and I think that we've seen the evidence of it being great with things like Endgame and Infinity War, and even, you know, the original Avengers, and you get the circle shot. Like, those are goosebump moments. But there's also, there's so much that goes into getting to those moments that it almost loses its impact. And I think that that's kind of where we're at with this, is that the Mandalorian, as just being a concept, is starting to lose it's starting to lose its sheen, because now it doesn't stand on its own. Now it's part of this whole other thing. And
Yeah, I would agree.
I think that it's a dangerous proposition, because you run the risk of wearing a character out. And that's what, like you said, the Boba Fett thing, it was like, the best parts of that show were the parts with Din Djarin, and that's a problem on a lot of levels, because you're having to overuse this character, number one, and now you're taking a character that was uber popular before, and the guy had like 4 lines maybe in the original series, and yet he was so popular because of the mystery, right? And we talked a little bit about that when we did those reviews, and now he's like a bitch. And it was like that show ruined that character.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. But with all that being said, the first trailer for Ahsoka looked pretty good.
Yeah.
I think that's somewhere in the summer. And based on how popular the Clone Wars animated series and Rebels has been, I think that Jon Favreau and certainly Dave Filoni know what they're doing. So we'll see, but I think that, you know, this season was a mess for me.
Same.
I mean, it had its moments. There's moments where,
Sure, and then for that, yeah.
but I think by and large it was kind of a mess.
Yeah, I think the C was appropriate, you say.
C, as in go Cavs.